Have you ever built something with your own hands, only to be treated like you never belonged there? Marcus Bennett did. He didn't walk in looking for attention. He walked in to check on a problem. What he found was worse than bad service. It was a reminder that even when you're the one who laid the foundation, someone might still look at you like you don't deserve to stand on it. But what happens when the man being ignored is the one who holds the keys to the entire building? This story isn't about revenge. It's about a reckoning, served quietly, calmly, and right on time. Marcus Bennett didn't walk into the hotel expecting a red carpet. He didn't want applause. All he wanted was to see how his team was treating people when no one was watching. So he came without notice. No assistant, no briefcase, no tailored suit, just jeans, sneakers, and a plain jacket, just another traveler arriving for the night. But the moment he stepped through the glass doors of the Grand Arcadia, the crown jewel of his hospitality empire, he knew something was off. The lobby smelled of polished marble and citrus-scented air freshener. A couple waited near the concierge desk. A bellhop stood by the elevator with his hands clasped. At the check-in counter, a young woman scrolled on her phone, head down, posture slouched. Marcus walked up, paused, and waited. She didn't look up. He cleared his throat. Still nothing. Not a glance, not a word, not even the mechanical "Welcome to Arcadia" that every employee was trained to say within 5 seconds of eye contact. Except she hadn't made any. That moment, quiet, small, and painfully clear, hit him harder than he expected. Because this wasn't just any hotel. This was his. He had designed the floor plan himself, approved the color of the carpets, chosen the scent in the air, and yet he was being treated like a man who didn't belong. Not because of who he was, but because of what he looked like. Older Americans watching this have lived through these moments. They know the sting of being ignored, of being seen as less than. Sometimes it's the tone, sometimes it's the glance, but most times it's the silence. That heavy, unbending silence where your presence is treated like a problem, like you're interrupting something when all you're doing is standing in line like everyone else. Her name tag said Ashley. She couldn't have been more than 24. Her face was tired in a way that didn't come from work. It came from entitlement. The kind that decides who gets treated well and who gets brushed aside. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He simply tapped the counter and said, "Excuse me." She let out a sigh, a long, dragged-out sigh that said, "This again." Then finally, she looked up. No smile, no greeting, just one word. "Yeah?" Not "welcome," not "how can I help you," just "yeah." Like he was a mistake standing too close to her side of the counter. That's when it started. That's when Marcus knew this wasn't going to be just another quiet audit. Because this time, the person being ignored wasn't just another guest. He was the man who built the entire room she was standing in. And tonight, someone was about to learn exactly what that meant. Ashley didn't ask for his name. Marcus had to offer it himself. Calmly, he said, "Marcus Bennett, I have a reservation." She blinked like the name meant nothing, typed with 2 fingers, then squinted at the screen as if she were reading ancient code. "Yeah, no, don't see anything. No apology, no effort, just those flat words tossed across the counter like change." Marcus leaned in slightly. "Can you check again?" She sighed. Not the patient kind, the "you're wasting my time" kind. Her nails clicked against the keyboard as she pretended to care for a full 3 seconds. Then she looked back at him with a smirk. "Still nothing. Maybe you booked the wrong hotel. Happens all the time." Older viewers will know that feeling, not the mistake, but the way the excuse is delivered, how quickly the blame is redirected, how casually the burden is put on you to explain why you don't seem to belong. Marcus didn't argue. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The confirmation email was there, clear as day, time-stamped, paid in full. He held it up. "I have it right here." Ashley barely looked. "The system doesn't lie," she shrugged. "Maybe you typed something wrong." It was a dismissal dressed as customer service. But Marcus had been in this business long enough to recognize the difference. He pulled out his second phone, corporate access. Quietly, without fanfare, he opened the internal dashboard, typed in his login, pulled up his own reservation. There it was, room 1835, confirmed. But as he scrolled through the system's activity log, a line of text jumped out. "Reservation deleted manually. User, A. Whitman. Ashley." There it was. Proof that this wasn't some random error. She had deleted it, deliberately, and not because the system glitched, because she didn't think he belonged. Because she looked at him, black, casual, no status symbols in sight, and made a call. And that's what hurts most. Not the inconvenience, not the delay, but the decision. The unspoken judgment passed in the span of 5 seconds. It's a pattern many viewers know well, especially those who've lived long enough to see how systems can be weaponized by something as subtle and dangerous as a smirk. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He simply held up the screen and turned it toward her. "Tell me, Ashley," he said, voice low, steady, almost kind. "What happens when a front desk agent deletes a reservation?" She froze, just for a second. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped to her sides. "It removes it from the system." Marcus nodded. "And who has permission to do that?" Her voice faltered. "Only front desk staff." He held the screen a little higher. Her name, her timestamp, her action, all there. Ashley's face went pale. And in that moment, Marcus didn't feel angry. He felt tired. Tired of the games. Tired of being asked to prove what he had already earned. Tired of people mistaking quiet for weakness. He didn't need to yell. He had something louder than volume. He had the truth. Ashley didn't say another word. Just turned to her screen and began typing. Her fingers moved faster now, not out of professionalism but panic. She pulled up a new room. "Found one," she muttered, sliding a key card across the counter. "Room 1427. Marcus didn't pick it up. He looked at her. Not angry, just steady. "Which room is that?" She paused. "It's available." Marcus let the silence stretch. He already knew. Room 1427, end of the hallway. Right by the maintenance closet. A paper-thin wall on one side, elevator shaft on the other, and a view of the dumpsters out back. The room that got reserved only when the hotel was full or when someone wanted to send a quiet message. And Marcus had designed this place. He knew every inch of it. He kept his voice level. "Ashley, do I look like I don't know what that room is?" She blinked. "It's what we have." He sighed. Not dramatically, just enough for her to hear the difference. "That's the worst room in the entire building. You know that, and you still handed it to me." "Why?" She swallowed hard. "It's just how the system assigned it." Marcus stepped back. Just one step. Just enough to give the moment space to breathe. Guests nearby were starting to listen. A bellhop froze mid-step. A couple lounging on the couch sat up slightly. The air shifted. Not tense, just waiting. He picked up the keycard, turned it in his fingers once, then set it back down. "You're trying to make me feel small, but you've forgotten something." Ashley didn't respond. Marcus leaned forward, quiet but firm. "I built this place." For older viewers, this moment rings familiar. The experience of watching someone younger, someone who just got here, decide that your presence is optional, that your name doesn't carry weight, that your work, your sacrifices, your legacy can be brushed aside with a fake smile and a bad room. Marcus didn't argue further. He turned and walked toward the elevators, not defeated, calculating. Every step forward meant something else was coming next, and Ashley had no idea what was about to hit her. Behind him, the lobby stayed quiet. Not the awkward kind. The kind where everyone knows something has just shifted, but no one wants to be the first to say it. Upstairs in room 1427, Marcus opened his laptop, logged into the system, and this time, he wasn't just looking for his reservation. He was looking for answers. The room was just as expected, narrow, noisy, and staring straight into the back alley bins. Marcus didn't even sit. He walked to the desk, opened his laptop, and got to work. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Because if Ashley had the nerve to delete a reservation in plain sight, he needed to know what else she had done when no one was watching. He pulled up the internal logs first. Not the sanitized versions the manager liked to review every quarter. The real ones. The raw feed. Every guest complaint. Every internal flag. Every misconduct report tied to that front desk. And it didn't take long before a pattern started to emerge. Ashley's name appeared again. Then again. And again. Dismissed a complaint without logging it. Claimed a guest never had a booking. Turned away a family during a storm claiming no availability, only for them to find rooms listed online minutes later. The reports weren't loud, none of them escalated. But they stacked, quietly, steadily, a pile of paper-thin grievances that told a much heavier truth. And then he found it. 2 formal complaints citing discrimination. Same front desk, same clerk. One was from a middle-aged Latino couple. The other from a younger black woman who had written in plain words, "She looked at me like I didn't belong." Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. Not because he was shocked, because he wasn't. He'd seen this before. Not just in hotels, but in banks, airports, lobbies, and offices. Places built to be welcoming until the wrong person walked through the door. For many older viewers, this is more than a plot twist, it's memory. How many times were they told the system was broken, when really, it was the people running it who chose who mattered? How many times did they stay quiet because fighting felt bigger than the moment? Marcus could have stopped there. He could have taken a screenshot and called it a night. But something deeper moved in him. He kept scrolling, past guest reports, past internal emails, until he found the manager file. Rick Coleman, general manager, employed 8 years, no warnings, no violations. And yet, every complaint tied to Ashley ended in the same status, no further action taken. Of course, Rick was the gatekeeper, the one who nodded, apologized, and filed things away until they were forgotten. A man who wore a tie like armor and handled conflict like it might stain his shirt. Marcus exhaled, slow and deep. He wasn't angry, he was clear. There's a difference. He closed the laptop, stood up, and looked at his reflection in the window. Not to admire it, just to center himself. Then he grabbed the key card, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and headed back downstairs. Marcus didn't storm down the hall. He didn't raise his voice or wave his phone like a weapon. He walked slowly, deliberately, like a man who already knew what came next. When he reached the lobby, Ashley was still at the desk, head bowed, pretending to be busy. She didn't look up. Maybe she thought it was over. It wasn't. Marcus didn't stop. He passed her without a word and went straight for the manager's office. The door was closed. He opened it anyway. Rick Coleman looked up, startled. A half-eaten sandwich sat on his desk. His tie was loosened, like he'd just survived a long day. But when he saw Marcus standing there, everything changed. "Mr. Bennett," he stammered, eyes wide. "I didn't know you were." Marcus shut the door behind him. "Save it, Rick." That tone, it wasn't aggressive. It was colder than that. Final. Rick stood up too quickly, knocking over his chair. "I swear I was going to handle it. You weren't going to do a damn thing," Marcus said, calm but sharp. "You've had reports sitting in your system for months, maybe longer. You saw the names, you saw the complaints, and you did nothing." Rick froze. The silence pressed in. "This place is my brand," Marcus continued, "and I just watched one of your employees delete my reservation like I was nobody. Not just rude, not just careless, deliberate." Rick opened his mouth to explain, but Marcus wasn't done. "You let it slide. You convinced yourself it was small stuff, one bad check-in, one upset guest. But Rick, it's not small when it happens again and again. That's not a glitch, that's a culture." For older viewers, especially those who've worked under weak leaders, this moment cuts deep. They know this man. The one who smiles in meetings, avoids hard calls, and lets the wrong people stay too long. He's not evil, he's just cowardly. And that's almost worse. Rick swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus stepped forward, just enough to make sure every word landed. "You're going to walk out there, right now, and you're going to fire Ashley. Not in private, not behind a door. You're going to do it where everyone can see, because that's where the damage happened." Rick's jaw dropped. "But right now?" "Right now." The weight of those words left no room for negotiation. And Rick, finally realizing who he was standing in front of, nodded. 2 minutes later, the entire lobby watched as the hotel manager approached the front desk. Ashley looked up. She knew. Her eyes flicked toward Marcus, just once. And then the unraveling began. She tried to argue, she tried to deflect, but it was over before the first excuse left her lips. Marcus stood nearby. He didn't speak, he didn't smirk, he just watched. Not for revenge, for accountability. Because someone had to say enough. And in that moment, as Ashley stormed toward the exit and Rick stood red-faced under the weight of long-overdue responsibility, a quiet truth filled the room. What you allow, you endorse. And today, that stopped. The echo of Ashley's footsteps had barely faded when Marcus turned back to Rick. The manager was still frozen by the front desk, pale and sweaty, like a man who thought he'd just done something brave, when all he'd really done was catch up to what should have happened months ago. Marcus didn't bother thanking him. This wasn't about applause. He walked past Rick without a word and headed toward the elevators. But halfway there he stopped, turned, walked back. Not for drama. For closure. He looked at Rick and said, flat. You think this is handled? Rick blinked. I thought. No, Marcus said. This is the first step. You fired a problem, but you didn't fix the system that kept her there. Rick's lips moved like he wanted to object, but there was nothing to say. For older viewers, especially those who've worked in broken workplaces, this hits deep. They've seen what happens when one bad actor gets removed while the culture stays the same. Nothing truly changes. People just get quieter. Marcus folded his arms. You let this place rot under your nose. You let it drift from what we built. You didn't just protect her. You protected your own comfort. Rick tried to gather himself. I didn't know it was that bad. That's the problem, Marcus replied. You had no idea what was happening in your own damn hotel. There was no yelling, just stillness, the kind that makes excuses fall flat. I'm giving you one last chance, Marcus said. You've got 24 hours to audit every guest complaint in the last 6 months. If I find one that wasn't addressed properly, you're gone. No second meeting. No final warning. Rick nodded slowly. He looked like a man standing at the edge of his own career. Marcus didn't wait for a reply. He turned to the front desk. 2 clerks still stood behind it, young, nervous, unsure whether to look busy or invisible. Marcus stepped forward, voice low but clear. This is your reset button, he said. Everyone in this room just learned something. Power doesn't always show up in a suit. Sometimes it walks in quiet and watches who gets ignored. He picked up the hotel phone, dialed one number. This is Bennett. Shut the hotel down for a full audit. Comp every guest. Pull every file. Review every employee. If they can't meet the standard, they're gone. Today, the silence in the lobby wasn't awkward. It was respect, the kind that settles in when the right person finally shows up. One woman at the concierge desk gasped quietly. A young bellboy paused mid-step, wide-eyed. They knew the name. They just never thought the man behind it would come in through the front door. Marcus hung up the phone, straightened his jacket, looked at the clerks and said, "Now you know who I am." Then he turned toward the elevator, and as the doors opened and swallowed him up, the truth stayed behind. What happened today wasn't just a firing, it was a reckoning. By the time Marcus reached his suite, the hotel was already shifting beneath his feet. Calls were being made, terminals were frozen for review. A quiet storm had moved through the building, and everyone could feel the pressure it left behind. But for Marcus, this wasn't about pressure, it was about precision. He poured a glass of water. No rush, no drama. Then he opened his laptop and logged into the central operations dashboard, the one that controlled everything from staff schedules to incident reports. He didn't need a second pair of eyes. He'd built this system himself, and now he was using it the way it was always meant to be used. He started with the basics. Recent guest complaints, dozens of them, many marked resolved, but with no follow-up, no proof, no real response. One complaint from a guest who was denied late checkout, despite being a loyalty member. Another from a couple who said they were offered the worst room available after asking for an upgrade. Marcus clicked on the staff tags. Same names, same patterns. The deeper he looked, the more he saw. This wasn't about one bad employee. It was about what had been tolerated under Rick's watch. What had been ignored because nobody expected to be questioned. Because no one imagined the founder would show up, dressed like just another guest. To older viewers, especially those who built their own businesses or led teams with pride, this part speaks clearly. It's the feeling of seeing your values stripped away by those who were supposed to uphold them. Marcus paused, then clicked open a separate file. A list of every current employee at the property. He began marking each with a status: review, interview, terminate, promote. One name stood out, a desk clerk named Carlos Reyes, 22, part-time, minimal training. But unlike others, he had notes in his file, positive notes, guests mentioning his kindness, patience, attention to detail. Marcus clicked promote. Not because Carlos asked for it, but because he earned it. He kept going. Quietly, methodically, the kind of work that doesn't show up in headlines but changes a business from the inside out. And downstairs, even without knowing what was happening behind those walls, the staff could feel it. A shift. A standard being reasserted. One bellhop whispered to a colleague, "I didn't know he still cared." He did. That's why he came back. Because leadership isn't about titles. It's about showing up when it's easier to stay away. Marcus closed his laptop, leaned back, exhaled. The cleanup had begun, not to punish, to rebuild. Because you don't save a legacy by letting it rot quietly. You protect it by standing up quietly, firmly, and without compromise. He stood near the door for a moment, watching them. Some looked guilty, some looked relieved, a few couldn't even meet his gaze. Then he stepped forward. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," he began. "I'm here because this place stopped reflecting what it was built for." No one interrupted. "When I started this hotel line, I didn't just want great service. I wanted a culture of respect. For every guest, for every employee. But somewhere along the way, we let shortcuts creep in. We let attitudes go unchecked. We made excuses." He let the silence sit. Let it press gently, not harshly. "Not anymore." A murmur passed through the room, uncertain but hopeful. It was the kind of speech they hadn't heard in years. Not from HR, not from corporate, not even from Rick, who stood off to the side, pale and quiet. "Some of you will stay, some of you won't. But those who remain will rebuild something better. Not for me, for yourselves. Because people don't come back for chandeliers. They come back for how they were treated." Then he stepped back. That was all. No threats, no promises, just truth. As the employees shuffled out to begin their day, Carlos caught Marcus by the sleeve. "Sir," he said quietly, "one of the guests you refunded yesterday left a note. Said no one had ever taken the time to listen before. She's extending her stay." Marcus smiled. "That's the business we're in." He didn't need the note, but it reminded him why he built this in the first place. Not just to offer rooms, to restore trust. Because every time someone like Ashley is allowed to stay, someone like that guest is made to feel small, and that's a cost no company can afford. Especially not his. Later that evening, as the city softened into dusk, Marcus stood alone in the suite overlooking the skyline. Same window, same view, but the air felt different. The anger that once buzzed beneath his skin had quieted. What remained now was something older. A kind of clarity you earn only through time, through scars, through learning when to speak and when to act. He poured a small drink, sat in the chair by the window, no laptop this time, no reports, just stillness. Somewhere downstairs, Carlos was guiding the night crew through new check-in protocols. Guests were settling into rooms they actually reserved, and the scent of fresh coffee lingered from the lobby cafe. For the first time in months, this place was running not just efficiently, but honestly. Marcus looked down at the keycard Ashley had handed him the night before. Room 427. He turned it in his fingers once, then dropped it in the trash. For those watching who've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or judged unfairly, this is the image that lingers. A man who didn't demand respect through volume, but through conviction. Who understood that dignity isn't something you request, it's something you reclaim. Because this story was never just about a hotel reservation. It was about the silent agreements we all live under, where some people are given the benefit of the doubt, and others are forced to earn it twice. Where customer service sometimes means selective service, and where power, if left unexamined, becomes permission to mistreat. Marcus didn't fire Ashley because she made a mistake. He fired her because she made it personal. He didn't replace Rick because of one oversight. He did it because passivity allowed rot to spread, and when that happens, someone has to cut deep to heal. And he didn't do it for ego. He did it because he remembered what it felt like to be treated like he didn't belong. People like Marcus, quiet builders, not loud conquerors, don't just flip tables when things go wrong. They re-level the whole room. Because when you've built something from the ground up, you don't let others turn it into a space where the very people you meant to welcome are the ones made to feel small. The next morning, a simple sign appeared at the front desk. Small, framed, easy to miss if you were rushing, but powerful if you stopped to read it. It said, "Respect is not a luxury. It's the standard." Marcus never signed his name on it. He didn't need to. Because for everyone who walked into that lobby from that day on, what mattered wasn't who he was. It was what he stood for. If you've ever been dismissed or judged based on how you look, how you speak, or where you come from, type 1. If you still believe respect, accountability, and quiet strength can restore what matters. Type 2. We read every comment, because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us what kind of world we want to live in, and who we have to be to build it. If this story resonated with something you've lived, seen, or believe in, subscribe. Not for numbers, but to keep stories like this alive, real, respectful, and unapologetically honest.